Welcome to one more edition of the Andor as Art podcast. I'm here with my good friend Joseph Tabenkin, a frequent conversation partner on this podcast series and frequent art and literature conversation partner. And also, I'm here again with Daphne Anders, screenwriter, playwright, and working in theater in Vienna, Austria. So, Joseph and Daphne, welcome for this. We'll call it a kind of wrap up discussion of Andor and a discussion of Rogue One. So, we'll be doing spoilers for Rogue One. If you haven't seen Rogue One, I think we're going to start our discussion with Rogue One, our impressions of it, how it's different from the series, and then maybe discuss a little bit more in depth Rogue One and see it as a tie-in or an extension of the story of Cassian Andor and Andor. Um, then after that, we're going to dive more deeply. Well, no, let me say this: we've been diving deep for the past 4 episodes, going through each of the 3 story arcs. We will take a 30,000 foot perspective. We will back up and not dive deeply. We'll get up into the air in our airplanes and try to get the bird's eye view perspective. Let's mix our metaphors here of the series as a whole, and maybe also season 2 in particular, if there's a difference between season 2 and season 1. But first, let's talk Rogue One. So, Rogue One, 2016. So, 6 years, I think, before season 1 of Andor. And it was not originally a movie that was created by Tony Gilroy. He was called upon after there were some snafus and the storytelling, and the big wigs at Disney were not happy with where it was going. And Kathleen Kennedy had him do some rewrites, some reshoots, and apparently the changes that Tony Gilroy made were significant enough that he's basically credited with the story of the movie. Tony Gilroy talks about how he gets a phone call from George Lucas telling him how wonderful the movie is. So he's the one kind of getting a call from George Lucas saying, "Hey, good job." Um, and it's from that Tony Gilroy gets the request to follow up Andor with a prequel, or follow up Rogue One with a prequel, which is Andor. And apparently, a lot of what they are doing with Andor is to set up and to backfill what is happening in Rogue One. So, Joseph, I know immediately after you finished watching the last episodes of Andor season 2, you watched Rogue One and then you went on to A New Hope. And Daphne, you've watched and you've seen Rogue One before, and you've rewatched some of it, and I've gotten a chance to rewatch Rogue One a little bit, and I'll tell you guys about my experience watching it, and then I want to hear about your thoughts on what your impressions are of Rogue One, how it's different from Andor, and then maybe afterwards we'll get into some more nitty gritty specifics. Now, the first time I rewatched it twice, and the first time I rewatched it, I was struck by how cinematic Rogue One is. It is a movie. It's soaring music, grand vistas, epic battles. It feels a lot like a Star Wars movie, including the appearance of Darth Vader at the end. And there were nuggets of the kinds of people in rooms having conversations that it permeates Andor, but there's very little of it. And I found myself clamoring for those and wanting those and kind of being bored at the battle scenes and kind of being bored at the extended plane or spaceships flying through space and at-ats coming through jungles. And I wanted more of Jin and Cassian having arguments. So I was a little bit disappointed on my first rewatch. On my second rewatch, kind of accepting that I'm getting into the theatrical experience, and also kind of having let Andor the series sink in for me, I was thinking, what am I going to find with Cassian's arc? How is Rogue One going to complete it? And I actually found that to be very satisfying. That there were a few key moments that completed the story of Cassian for me, that I wasn't expecting to complete. That and then in my first rewatch, it kind of went over my head a little bit. So I had a little bit watching Rogue One, the similar kind of experience that I have often watching Andor, where it kind of goes over my head a little bit the first time I watch it, and then the second time on rewatch, puzzle pieces start to come together. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, let me start with you, Joseph. Joseph, what was your experience like with watching Rogue One after watching Andor?
Um, I think similar to yours. I didn't know that. I thought Tony Gilroy created it from scratch, but I could tell watching it was like a war of two souls. So I had just assumed that Tony Gilroy was not given the freedom to make the movie he wanted to make. Makes sense that no, he was trying to salvage a movie that somebody else made, and so that also explains what I watched. But it felt like all the things I didn't like about it were the Star Wars elements, all the things, but you got these brief flashes of what you see in Andor. I'm thinking of I don't remember it. It's been a few weeks since I've watched it, but I remember I think there's a scene with Jin and Andor where she just wants to bail, and he's explain like trying to you don't know what has gone into this. And just the last scene of Rogue One's beautiful, I think, especially in the arc of Andor, is like perfection for how Andor ends. Um,
That
but
last scene where they're both on the beach after the Death Star is
yeah,
kind of
and
caused this explosion on the planet, and they're waiting. They embrace as they're about to be consumed by the the horizon line sunset or sunrise of the flash of light.
well, and what was interesting is so I remember enjoying Rogue One when I saw it,
Mm-hmm.
or I was curious what I would find going into it because I remember enjoying it. Um, and then I also misremembered certain details. Like for some reason, I thought their embrace was more romantic at the end, and I was like, how is that going to square with Rogue? So I had all these like apprehensions going
Mm-hmm.
into Rogue One about how is this going to fit with the arc. And one thing I was pleasantly surprised with was one, how much worse it was than I remember it being in terms of as a movie, how much I disliked the Star Wars elements and how jarring that was in contrast with watching Andor so close to it. But then also how much more perfect some of the things I thought were going to conflict actually fit. So that last scene in particular, because you have the whole Bix history with of Andor, and that's not fully resolved. Like there's still Andor, the show still leaves with the potential that he might one day see Bix again. And so it would be weird if in Rogue One he had a romantic,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not how that last scene goes at all. It's not a romantic embrace. And so I thought, oh, that's actually the way they're embracing is actually perfect for them. It's not romantic. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like we made it worth it kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that it was like a war of two souls, but I think Andor's soul still won, or Tony Gilroy's soul still shines out in the movie.
That's a nice summation. A War of Two Souls, but Andor's soul still wins. How about you, Daphne? What are your feelings of Rogue One versus Andor?
I think I share your guys' impressions of it being mostly a film of its own, but with these flashes and nuggets and elements, also to mix metaphors here, that you sort of look out for, and that especially after watching Andor strike you all the more. Um, I also noticed that just in any scene where Cassian appeared in Rogue One, it just felt so much fuller, which of course makes sense because you know characters' backstories, so everything seems richer. But I felt specifically as well, not just because we knew the concretes of his backstory more elaborately, but because we had watched him go on this thematic journey of personal development, really, and go through so many difficult decisions and have his highest, deepest thoughts changed, so that everything that he said felt just like it had all the more oomph to it. And I liked seeing that a lot. I also enjoyed noticing little moments that I think actually connect to the higher theme of Andor. So that was especially just I have so much admiration um, just because of the reverse structure of it, so that yeah, just the continuity is all the more impressive if you remember that it was set up
Mm.
from behind, right? That Andor was crafted to fit Rogue One, and yeah, which makes it all the more impressive how organically Rogue One seems to grow out of Andor. Yeah, so I liked it a lot. I don't think I will be rewatching it as much as I will be rewatching Andor.
Hmm.
But I appreciate it. It's like, wow, yeah, good.
All right. Well, cool. So it sounds like we're kind of all have a consensus here. More Andor, and we can kind of see where Rogue One ties in. So I want to get a little bit more to the specifics of Rogue One and how it does tie in. And I want to start off by saying there's one particular question that I had that kind of frustrated me with Andor, with the way that the series left off, and that I was hoping that Rogue One would answer. And that question was, okay, does Cassian have a choice about all this? Is he a hero with free will? Is he somebody who is making a choice to do something? Or is he kind of on this path that the Force and others have laid out for him? Now, the thing I really enjoyed about the ending of season one is we get to see in the final moments Cassian making this choice. Um, Take me in, kill me now or take me in. And then in season two, Bix is the one who makes a choice for him. And it kind of pretty passively is part of the story. So I was hoping to see in Rogue One some more assertion in part or a kind of completion of what his story is. And as you're describing, Daphne, kind of his personal development over time and what form that would take. And I remember watching it in the first time, I thought, we're kind of retreading the same thing with Cassian here. He's a roguish figure, but then he redeems himself. And I was like a little bit disappointed because it felt like instead of getting an extension, we're getting a microcosm. Instead of getting, here's the completion of his story, we're getting here's the smaller version of the Cassian Andor story. But watching the second time, I think I've got a better sense of a completion of the story that is satisfying for Cassian. I want to give you guys a 2 or 3 sentence summary of Rogue One from the perspective of Cassian, treating him as a central character. So let me know what you think of this. Cassian is commanded by the Rebel Alliance general to find and kill the creator of the Death Star, the engineer responsible for the Death Star. Along the way, he encounters someone very much like him, who had been like him, Jen Erso, indifferent to the rebel cause, but starts to change her mind about the rebel cause. And in the pivotal moment when he is supposed to assassinate her father, the engineer, he disobeys orders and doesn't go through with it. As a consequence of the news that Jen brings to the Rebel Alliance, the Rebel Alliance disbands, breaks up, unwilling to fight a war anymore because of the overwhelming odds against them. And while Jen is ready to go on a suicide mission, nobody else is, except for Cassian and his group of similarly amoral veterans of the rebellion that are willing to go through with it. And together, Jen and Cassian, in through their action of defying the Rebel Alliance, inspire the Rebel Alliance to join a great battle that leads to down the line to bigger victory. Okay, so that was more than two or three sentences, but what do you think of that as a kind of summary? I'm getting
I think it's pretty
Daphne's like,
accurate.
mhm.
Um, I think my only hesitation is I wonder if there's an essential missing from it, I think.
Go for it.
Like well, you asked the question, is Rogue One like a continuation of kind of the last chunk of episodes of Andor or season 2 of Andor? And does Andor have free will in it all? Like is he choosing to go down this path? And my I think there's a lot of interesting parallels between Luthen's arc and Andor's arc, is where my head
Oh,
goes to this.
okay.
And at kind of giving us an insight into the nature of a rebellion and all that you can kind of hope for in the odds and how great they are, is the most pivotal choice is jumping in. And then I'm also taken back to the first one of the first scenes of season 2. What does Andor say to him? You made this choice long ago, to the girl in the,
Yeah,
he's
Tanaya. Yeah, one of my favorite speeches. Yeah,
yeah, he's like you've decided this long ago.
yeah.
And that's kind of a common theme. Like a theme of both seasons is there's some moment where people get all in. And that's the most important choice. But once you're in, it feels like the odds are so great that all you care about is what can you contribute to just push this a little bit along. And it's very interesting how Luthen's life ends, right? Where he doesn't get to see it through. He knows that going into it, he's probably not going to see that through. And hey, if he can just do one more thing, it seems like all he cares about doing is one more thing. And so Rogue One to me is just Andor's one more thing. This is just the next thing that needs to be done. And that is the continuation of Andor season 2. But what's significant about it is we get to see a really significant one more thing that he does, like a really important. And that's kind of what you hope for. All you can hope for is that one more thing that you get to do before your time is up in the rebellion makes a difference.
So, so that's kind of, was there anything in the story that really showed that for you? You said there was a kind of an essential element missing. So it's like a more of a thematic element, or the motivation, or like the development of element. He, it's not something about, okay, he's got a revelation about his character or he makes a significant choice. It's that he keeps going. And that makes me think a little bit of, I think, Jin has a speech when they're on the beach of Scarif, and she tells the troops and the ship before they go out, okay, we just keep moving forward, and once we take one chance,
Mm,
and we get the next chance, and then after that we get the next chance until our chances run out
yeah.
or until we win.
Well, Andor in I can't remember, like talks about his luck running out, right? Earlier. And he's used up all his luck. He wants out, but he keeps going. And that's one thing I've just been thinking about. So, you mentioned in your summary the scene of him deciding about whether to kill Galen or so.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that kind of perplexed me a little bit. Not that decision, because I think you see in Andor season 2, he is still conflicted, right? He's reluctant to let the Gormans walk into this trap almost that Luthen is setting for them. Um, and so he has some humanity that he's reluctant to embrace Luthen's approach to fighting the rebellion. But in Rogue One, he takes the orders like without pushing back, which is just interesting because his dynamic with that guy in Andor is a little different. So that was the only like weird inconsistency I found between them. But I tried to take it from the perspective of we don't get to see the full arc of Andor season 2. Like there's years that pass in between, and he alludes to doing a lot of really horrible things. Not horrible
Mhm.
things, but like to making some hard choices.
Hmm.
And so you kind of get the sense this wasn't the first assassination he may have had to do. And that may have been an assassination of somebody not evil. And so I'm able to accept that in the full arc. And so um I didn't find that as like a pivotal choice. I found that like as something Andor's always struggled with and not something that was defining of him.
Hmm.
But to me, what was more definitive is like just that relentless taking the next step and this being the best, like for one of the best rebels, the best thing he could hope to achieve out of it.
Okay, so a couple questions are coming out of that, Joseph. One is, uh, all right, there's this conflict within Cassian that we see throughout especially season two, about his humanity, his decency. He doesn't want to burn it up. He's got compassion, and he will kill soldiers. He will kill those that are in his way. You know, uh, Mon Mothma's driver, boom, no second thought. Tivik, who's at the beginning of Rogue One, you know what? You're not going to get out of here alive. Let me just kill you to be able to get out of here to get this information on the way. He will do those things, but there's also a little bit of decency. So the question is, in that moment where he disobeys orders, is it kind of he doesn't? Is it his humanity, his compassion that's coming in, or is there something else? The other thing that you're bringing up, Joseph, is Andor's seemingly wanting to follow orders and priding himself on following orders in Rogue One versus in Andor when he makes it a kind of joke, and I forget that general's name that he kind of just continuously leaves and says goodbye. You can't hold me here. If I'm gonna stay here, if you're forcing me here to stay here, then I'm gone. I'm not part of this anymore. So how is that the same Andor in Rogue One? But Daphne, I want to see where you want to go with this. Anything in particular about the Cassian story or the way I laid it out that seems significant to you, or anything that you want to bring up about what Joseph's mentioning?
So I'm really enjoying this exchange between you guys. It covers much of what I see too, and what were my first responses to your summary there, Luke. And I do see. So I'd actually like to hear, Joseph, what you have to say about Luke's first question about this humanity and what is really happening when Cassian is disobeying orders in Rogue One, because yeah, there's this duality in a sense to Cassian in Rogue One, that on one hand he has much of Luthen now, and having seen Andor, we see that. We see his moral authority in the rebellion, and just the way he talks to Jyn and the arguments he uses. On the other hand, I think Luthen, or this is a question: would Luthen have disobeyed orders? Would Luthen have gone through and killed her father? What would Luthen have done in that situation? What differentiates Cassian there? I think that would be also an interesting way to look at this as, yeah, to look at this journey that we're talking about, this Cassian arc throughout, and see how it develops throughout Rogue One as well.
One scene I'm thinking back on is when I can't remember what chunk of episodes this is, maybe the second one, when Bix is really struggling and she confronts Andor about killing the soldier or kid. It was kind of
Hmm.
presented as it was just a kid and he killed him. And it went in a direction I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be, Bix feels a lot of guilt. But and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way it ended was Andor actually felt a little bit more like he was rationalizing, and Bix just kind of said, "Stop protecting me. You did what you had to do. Let's make it worth it. Like we have to." And like what I just found interesting about that is a lot of other characters are much quicker to drink the Kool-Aid than Andor is. Drink the Luthen Kool-Aid, if you will. Like, Bix is on board. Sorry, what's the curly-haired guy's name? Um, uh,
Curly haired.
Wilman?
pardon?
Willman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilman? Wilman?
He's on board.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got the right O.
And this is something I think you see in literature, or at least I'm thinking of like Atlas Shrugged is often like the greater heroes are the last to kind of fully embrace it, or embrace the truth. So like I wonder how much of an impact that had on Andor is like, is his primary motivation whatever it takes? And the only way he's gonna do something is if he thinks it's necessary for that next step. And I don't remember the scene enough where he's actually having to pull the trigger.
Hmm.
I mean, we find out later on it wasn't necessary because they didn't need him anymore, right? They didn't need Galen Erso anymore. Like killing him wouldn't have materially changed, but I don't think Andor knows that when he's deciding. So I can't quite remember his body language enough. But that part does perplex me, so I don't have a good answer. Because the way I see Andor's character is he would have done it if he thought it was necessary. Like really, he still got his humanity, but
Yeah.
he's if he has to do it, he's going to do it.
I agree with that. He's going to fulfill the mission if that's necessary in order to complete his task as a soldier. Um,
But he will act if he disagrees with the mission.
yes, he will act. He will act. So I think the key here is maybe in the conflict that he has with Jin. So the way that they butt heads with each other. The the father becomes a becomes two possibilities. One, he's an enemy that needs to be killed because he still represents potential danger to create something more to help fix or build or whatever it is. Or he trusts Jen. He buys into her story that her father has created this mechanism within the Death Star that will destroy it, and that message needs to be conveyed. And the best way to convey that message, now that the hologram is gone, is to
Right.
save the father, to bring him back. So in this moment, he's having to decide whether or not he trusts Jen or he fulfills the mission of the soldier that he's supposed to go through with. And he has a lot of reason to doubt Jen because Jen has been somebody who has not been a rebel. She's been one of my favorite lines in Rogue One was when Saw Gerrera asks, was trying to get her to like show some dedication to the rebel cause. He says to her, "Do you want to see the Imperial flag flying everywhere?" And she says, "You don't see it if you don't look up." um, and so she's apolitical, and it's that moment where she learns what her father has done for 15 years, playing a Luthen kind of charade, hiding himself, pretending that he's essential to this in order to be able to set this this mechanism that will destroy the Death Star within it for his daughter. And that starts her conversion, like almost a sudden conversion, like, oh my God, my father abandoning me has been because he loved me. And Cassian has to decide whether or not he believes her. And when Jen comes back after Cassian has decided not to shoot him and confronts him with the fact, you were going to shoot my dad, Cassian basically tells her, I've been in this rebellion since I was a kid. You're just coming in right now. Don't tell me what I do and what I shouldn't do, what I stand for. I'm a lifelong rebel. And exactly why he decides, I think it might be less to do with I think Joseph, I think you're right. He's going to do whatever it takes to for the cause. And I think at that moment he's realizing that this is what's more important for the cause to believe her. In a similar way that he is he believes Clea and Luthen about the information on the Death Star. So this is something that was fascinating just in general with Rogue One. Watching Rogue One made me kind of see a little bit more of the kind of story that's being told in Andor. So you kind of have some parallels. Speaking of parallels, Joseph, you've got
Yeah, I buy that as the best explanation. Like,
yeah,
especially when you think about just the whole interaction of him trying to convince them in the end of Andor to believe Luthen, and he knows that because it's secondhand information, like three times removed, and he's seeing how reluctant they are to accept it. And then you have this very similar conversation in Rogue One, right? Where he comes back because they come back to Yavin after the confrontation, where Galen dies, and he has to relay, hey, there is a weakness, and we have to go to get the plans. And they still don't believe him. They want to disband. They're like, okay, well now we believe that this thing exists, but now it's hopeless, and like, and so he's like twice burned now, where he's so I like that explanation. Like that to me fits the most is I don't buy that he like I wouldn't have bought that he just wanted to save him for the sake of saving him.
mhm.
I think yes, he's got the humanity, but above all else, he's gonna try and make it worth it. Like he's not gonna get to see Bix unless the rebellion wins or he dies. And so the best explanation to me is okay, because Jin does know at that point about like she's seen the hologram. She knows she's trying to convince him, hey, we need to get more details from him. And so I think to me that's the most like I like that explanation. It
Mhm.
fits with everything.
Mhm. And you're making me think. At the end of Rogue One, the general asks him, "Do you trust this Tivit guy? This asset that you have that's part of Saw Gerrera?" And Cassian says, "I try.
Hmm.
I try to trust him." And so you get this constant throughout season 2 of Andor, especially. Who can you trust? Mon Mothma and Luthen, they don't trust each other. Who can you trust? And when Cassian is trying to convince the council, you got to trust what Luthen says. It's because I know him. I know all of him that tells me that this is right. But the council, they don't know him. And now Cassian is kind of put in the place of the council a little bit. He doesn't really know Jen. So is he going to take a leap of faith almost? And I'm wondering, Daphne, if this is a little bit where maybe there's a little bit of force sensitivity thing. Like, do you trust in the force? Do you trust this person because maybe there's something special here?
So you'd say that the force is really something we should see that as a very, very real concrete metaphor for this just connection, like connection between people for having seen someone and trusting him, just like this little leap. Uh, is that what you're suggesting?
I think so. I think so. The Force plays a much bigger part in Rogue One
Mm.
than any others, and part of like the secondary characters, Baza and I think Chewit, the one who's a true believer and the other one who's a skeptic, and their dynamic. Are you going to believe it? And Jen also has been being constantly like reinforced, like her mom gives her the Kyber crystal medallion and says trust in the Force, and so there it's a trust in the Force, believe in the Force. It's not. I think there's that a little bit of a religious element there, and I wonder if Cassian on his kind of arc in relationship to the Force at that moment when he decides not to pull the trigger, he is kind of thinking, okay, I've got to go by my feeling here. I got not what I
See,
know, but my
I see a bit of a tension there between the feeling and what I know, because it seems like the feeling is also based on personal knowledge.
Yeah,
On knowing someone and
yeah.
having seen someone, and the way that, yeah, it ties in with how at the end of season 2 of Andor, Cassian defends Luthen and says, "No, my personal knowledge of him is what makes my judgment more accurate, not less objective. It's because I'm working with what I know, and that means something." And yeah, and also his choice to support Jin then in Rogue One is based on having seen her personal connection to her father. Maybe that's, I'm not quite sure on that, but it seems like that moment definitely then somehow caused him to make the choices he did later on. And so I don't think it's quite accurate to see this as a conflict between hard knowledge
Hmm.
and some cushy sort of feeling that you have after having spent time with someone. But I think what makes Cassian's choices so real and believable is that we've seen him see these people, and we know that this knowledge means something and that he should be acting on it. And it doesn't feel like a leap of faith so much as trusting what you know.
So when you
Uh,
say we know he's seen these people. So, and maybe Joseph, if you have thoughts that come to mind, what are some of those moments in Andor, some of those people that he's seen kind of have, or be like Jin in a way?
Well, quick question. Can you
Yeah.
remind me what that force healer says to him? Do you
Uh,
remember what the
yeah,
word she used, like about
yeah.
carrying people, or what was it?
So gathering experiences, gathering kind of spiritual, almost spiritual fuel. Fuel is my word there. But throughout, he's picking up these things that is preparing him, and she's contrasting him to somebody
He's a
who,
messenger.
yeah. And
If I
also, I
understood.
think one significant thing there, Joseph, he contrasting him to somebody who lets the past shape them. Instead, he's not letting the past shape him. He's gathering things as he goes along, as he shapes himself, or as he's being shaped as he goes along.
Yeah, and that's one thing you see about Andor throughout is he's like a sponge of nuance. Like
Can I
there's
put that
so
down as a maybe so far the phrase of the episode?
sure.
Sponge of nuance. Okay.
He like there's so many great moments where he sees little details. Like he notices everything. He's always watching. Like I know you called out a line that I almost passed by in the first batch of episodes when he's with those ragtag
Mhm.
rebels and he's like, "Do you have enough water?" Like he's constantly thinking about the situation, what's happening. Like he's aware of weaknesses in the Empire, and so there's that kind of jives with that the for I think with what if I remember what the Force healer said to him, he's collecting throughout,
Yeah.
and he's very good at picking up on the subtle nuance that's essential,
So is
right?
this kind of to reinforce what Daphne is saying about him kind of being familiar with Jin or not understanding Jin because he's understood, seen the subtleties of other people develop a little bit like Jin?
Yeah, that's what I would guess. Like we've seen him build this muscle of reading situations and people and um, developing an intuition,
Yeah.
right? Once you get that 10,000 hours, there's a lot that you can do subconsciously,
Yeah.
and no matter what field you're in. And so I kind of see that playing out for him as like, I can believe it. Like I can believe that his gut's telling him to go a certain way, and it's not arbitrary. It's it's something he's picking up on because he has that from what we've seen in the previous episodes.
All right. So Daphne, I want to give you one more opportunity to share thoughts, but then I want to go on to one more scene because right now this is turning into a Rogue One podcast, which is great, but I want to make sure to get some bigger picture things too. So any follow-up thoughts there with Cassian, with his understanding
yeah.
of Jen and
So
mhm,
yeah, I think maybe a way to sum it up, you guys tell me if this is accurate, is that we're seeing Cassian become more and more a person whose conviction of the cause is deeply informed by his concrete experiences and especially by his personal connections. And so in Rogue One, when we see him use that muscle, make choices about the cause, guided not by some abstract thoughts, not by orders that have been given him in the past, but what he gathers. I think we're allowed to trust that in a way that isn't religious, but that is just the conclusion, just the consequence of what we've learned about him and how he makes decisions so far.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I want to get to I think the next important Cassian scene, which comes after the news comes back that that there is this planet-destroying weapon out there, and that the Council, Rebel Alliance Council, refuses to listen to Jin's plea for wanting to start a war and to fight. Instead, they break apart. And this is a scene I wish I was a little bit more clear in the show, but I think this is the end of the Rebel Alliance at this moment. It's over. Everybody's going off in their own separate way to hide because now it's too much. And Jin is the only one that's left. It's like, we got to do something. And then here comes Cassian and says, I'm here with you. And I want to read that speech that he gives, which I think is his explanation to her of why they're joining her, and maybe isn't necessarily a kind of revelation that Cassian has for himself, but a kind of summation and affirmation of who he has always been. So here's his speech. As he's there with Milshi and a bunch of the troops behind him, he tells Jen, some of us, well, most of us, we've all done terrible things on behalf of the rebellion. Spies, saboteurs, assassins. Everything I did for the rebellion. And every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause that I believed in, a cause that was worth it. Without that, we are lost. That's interesting. We're lost. I think he's meaning almost morally. We're lost. We're lost. Everything we've done would have been for nothing. I couldn't face myself. If I gave up now, none of us could. Rebel Alliance is disbanding. All these people who who haven't sacrificed so much, they're leaving. But I've sacrificed so much. I've done things that prevent me from sleeping at night. And I've got to keep going because I couldn't face myself. And that couldn't face myself reminded me of his speech that he gives to Naya at the beginning of season 1 in episode 1. And I think this is the moment for Cassian, the ultimate moment that he has that, of the ultimate moment that he has in coming home to himself, as he describes to her. And I'm going to read that speech, that short speech that he gives to Naya to get her to join the circle of rebellion. And this is what he says. After Naya, the tech worker, asks, if I die tonight, was it worth it? And he says, this makes it worth it. This, right now, being here at the moment you step into the circle. Look at me. You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You're coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear. Let that protect you. And I think this is the moment that Cassian is truly coming home to himself. And this is a moment where I was thinking of it as he's now making the decision for himself that this is his cause completely. This is not Bix making the choice for him by her leaving. I'm going to go on this suicide mission because I need to know that everything that I've done for the cause will be for something, as you like to say, Joseph, will be worth it. So did that scene strike you as it did me, or are there any thoughts that you have about that moment? Does it feel significant to you now, or did it feel significant to you then?
I think it's
You
significant,
mean
but
his speech to Naya?
To
Sorry.
his speech, not to Naya, but to
Okay. To
to
in Rogue One.
yeah,
In
to
Rogue
Jen.
One,
Yeah.
yes. Hmm.
I don't see it as a choice he's making. Like, I don't see that as a definitive moment. I see
Mhm.
that as him saying, of course, like, I've already chosen. Like, like the choice happened long ago. And here, well, I have a question I'll
Mhm.
raise, but I want to hear what Daphne thinks about that specific scene. And the question I want to ask too is, I was very perplexed by the third batch of episodes when we first see Andor again, and he's playing cards and poker and stuff. And it's not clear to me what has happened since Bix left and that scene. Has he been just hanging out on Yavin, or has he been actively fighting still? Because that will affect how I interpret the scene a little bit, like this particular speech. So I'll throw that question on top of what Luke asked.
Is there any reason to think that he's not actively fighting?
I don't know. We just that happens in what, the second or third episode of that last batch.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen him since that K2 wake up and Bix is gone, right? And then we see him playing cards. And he just looks so at ease and free. And I could interpret that as either he is now just
I
all
think he would
in
not be there if he were not fighting.
if you were fighting.
Yeah.
That's my inclination is the
Yeah.
reason it's
And he's a captain. He's being promoted,
right.
and he's you know
And he
taking
jumps like as
ships.
soon
Yeah.
as he gets the signal, he
Hmm.
goes. It's not like there's
No,
any
no, yeah,
conflict. So my interpretation of it then is when we see him in the last three episodes of
yeah,
Andor,
yeah.
we talked about they didn't show us all these details as much, but like one of the ideas at the beginning of season two was, okay, the journey is going to be him losing all of his attachments, anything that would keep him conflicted. And to me, you look at how at ease he is during that poker game,
Yeah.
and to me, that's like he's just in. He's with the rebels. He's at ease from there's no alternative paths here. And so when I read that speech, it's just him explaining why this is not a choice. Like, of course, I'm not walking away. Like, I've already come to peace. Like, I lost Bix over this thing. Like, you have no idea all the things that have happened. Yeah, if there's a chance we can save it, like, there's nothing else to do.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, especially the way he delivers a speech. It's not something that feels in any way conflicted or like he's got to really force himself. There's this kind of lighthearted confidence about him. Yeah, I'm ready
And
to die, and we've already made this decision that we've got to make it worth it. There's no fear. There's no doubt. Mhm.
and the essence of his speech to Nayab is awareness that these kinds of things are not something you actually choose in the moment you think. They're decisions that you make long ago. And he's
And that,
conscious of that
yeah,
telling
and
her.
it's like it's just a natural consequence of a decision that you made long ago.
Yeah.
This is, oh, I really like that point. If you made the choice 15 years ago, then doing this now is going to be easy, and let that protect you. You are yourself. You've come home to yourself. So rather than this is an important moment of choice that Cassian makes, it's just a rubber stamp on what he has kind of decided all along, even way back when to the end of season one, where he tells Luthen, "Kill me now or take me in."
And maybe you guys have, like I've certainly had experiences where I reflect on choices I made in my teens, let's say. that were essential to developing the character I have that like make certain choices I make today just easy and inevitable. Um, and so it's not like we're talking about you made a decision to be in the rebellion. It's you made choices on where you stand on certain things
Yeah.
that shape your character in such a way that you will not have a choice when it comes to later. So it's not, I just want to be clear, it's not like I think there's a negation of free will here or anything. It's
No, no,
that
no.
you establish how you see right and wrong on certain things, how you view the world, that then makes other choices down the road easy and inevitable.
Yeah, what do you think of that, Daphne?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with everything. And it's a really powerful point. I also noticed, or you guys tell me if this checks out, but in Cassian's speech in Rogue One, it's not so much a situation of choice either, just because there aren't any huge stakes there for him personally. So in helping, in supporting Jin, he goes against the Alliance Council, the Rebel Council, but he's been already at odds with them since now the last few episodes of Andor when they put him under house arrest, and he goes against that. So it's not again, I that sort of strengthens my impression that I share with you, that that's just him making the obvious move and the obvious assertion, and the reason I still enjoyed that moment, so it didn't just feel predictable and boring, is that it felt different than, yeah, I also saw the connection there to the speech he gives to Naya. And with Naya, that was the first time we see him, it's fresh season 2, and now we see him take this position of authority and just moral confidence. And that's interesting, and that informs us, and it's almost as though he's doing it for the first time for us, at least. So it seems like growth. And here it's another new confident version of Cassian where it's not new anymore, where that's just his heroic stature that he's presenting to us, and that's inspiring and elevating in its own way.
Yeah, it's a natural continuation of everything that's been built up over the course of the show. So when watching the movie in isolation for the first time, it might feel more like, okay, this is a decision that he's made within the movie to be dedicated to Jin, to completely go against orders, but the way he delivers it is not in the movie kind of makes more sense with seeing the whole arc of Cassian having already made the decisions, and this is um, just the natural follow through to that. And Joseph, I really like the connection that you're making. That the personal connection as a young man, you're making these choices that will guide the rest of your life. You may not be aware of it, but then when you remember this is a choice that I've already made, it just feels natural to follow through with it. It's a little bit of what does integrity look like? It's easy. It's
Mhm.
it's 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 smooth if it's built into you like that. And Cassian has gathered enough over time to make that moment to join Jen just naturally smooth.
Sorry, something that just occurred to me too. I don't know if this is a, well, let's try it out. I was thinking about Cassian saying how his luck has run out, and then I've also just was thinking about how there are often times in my life I felt lucky, and then if I give it some thought, I can trace back how the luck was actually connected to some decision I made long ago, right? Like I got a job out of university that like my friend's dad just had hired us on the whim over a summer. And he was like, oh, what a sweet job that we got out of the blue that ended up having a big impact on the course of my life. But, well, it was because I made certain choices to be friends with that person in the first place, right? You can kind of trace back these things. And I'm just thinking to Andor now about often we think about things that happen to us as lucky or unlucky in the moment. And Andor is kind of sees it that way too, as my luck has run out. And yet he continues to get lucky like things tend to still go his way in a lot of situations. And it kind of reinforces, I don't know, to me, that idea of the choices you make when you can are going to have these repercussions you can't see, and you have to that's why it's important to be conscious of making your choices, is you kind of don't know when they're going to pay you back in the future.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Okay, so let's wrap up our discussion of Rogue One with two lines I want to bring up that uh, continue this kind of inner joy and peace that Cassian has. That in two different ways, I think, harken back to Andor. And this is after they have successfully transmitted the message. Krennic has been shot, and then they're kind of like starting to get away from the tower, uh, and to try to escape. Though that it seems like they're not going to be able to, but they're not quite there yet. Right after they transmit the message, Cassian, kind of with a little bit of a smile, says, "You think anybody's listening?" And he says it in a way, this is after they transmitted things, and he says it in a way that's not fearful or anguished. And it immediately calls back to a scene from season one that I found perplexing, where in Narkina 5, in the prison, when they, you know, Cassian is trying to convince Kino Loy that we're not being bugged. They don't care enough. And he yells out at the top of his lungs, "Nobody's listening! Nobody's listening!"
Hmm.
And in that's a different situation. It's like, the Empire doesn't care enough to about us. We're just, nothing beneath their feet, so they don't even have to pay attention to us. And that's calling back that moment a little bit, but with a big twist to it, which is, do you think anybody's listening up there? Like, we did our work to get a message out, and that I think there is somebody listening, and it's something positive there, and that kind of optimism on the part of Cassian is so different than in the beginning of his arc when he was telling Luthen, "It's useless. We can't do this. The Empire's not doesn't care about us. We're too tiny." So that's one. And then I want to hear if you have any thoughts on those to wrap up. The second one is Cassian's final words. And this is Jyn Erso's story. So when they know that they could see the kind of the wave of destruction coming towards them, and they sit on the beach, he tells Jyn, "Your father would be proud." And I was trying to mull over why is he telling her that? Okay, we know why he's telling her that, because Jin's conversion comes from her recognition of her father's love. But what does it mean for Cassian to say that?
Hmm.
What is he thinking? And the thing that I bet he's thinking is, my mother would be proud.
Yeah.
The way that he gets back to Ferrex to find out that his mother's dead, and that beautifully sentimental scene where Brasso communicates Marva's last words to Cassian, and Cassian desperate to hear those, wanting to hear how much his mother loves him, and her not getting the chance to see him become the man that she thinks he could become. So I like to think Cassian at that moment too is thinking, "Yes, Marva. Yes,
Yeah,
Mom."
what did she say to Brasso? Like, when he finally accepts who he is, he'll be unstoppable, or
Mm.
an unstoppable force or
He knows
something.
what he knows. He feels what he feels, and when those two
Right.
combine, he'll be an unstoppable force for good.
Mm.
Yeah, that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
To me, that's
I
the
want to
essence of
write
Rogue
that
One.
down and hang it on the wall. Yeah.
To me, that's the essence of Rogue One, though. It's not like, yeah, originally it was its own little story, but it's not about does Cassian change or anything. It's about realizing that promise from season one. And
Yeah.
that is, right, like him getting to look death in the eye and say, yeah, like
Mhm.
we did it.
Daphne, which part of it that was it that you wanted to write down? I'll put on the wall.
The he knows what he knows
Mhm.
and he feels what he feels, and once those two combine, and it sort of ties in also with what we were talking about with his knowledge, but also his intuitions that are, yeah, that he's gathered,
Yeah.
and that those are really just part of one character and one confident and reasonable, rational whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joseph, Rogue One is a promise fulfilled for what was set up in the series at the beginning. I like that thought, and maybe that's a nice way to wrap up this discussion. In the little time that we have left, we can go in a couple of different directions. I want to hear maybe we could do some rapid fire, little superlatives lists, um, and I'm curious. I've got a few top fives, and maybe we won't delve into too much about them, but I'll share mine. And if you have some different ones or you want to share yours, however you want to do it, I've got, first of all, my top five favorite characters. Okay. All right. Number five, Luthen. Number four, Clea. Number three, Cyril Karn. Number two, Nemec. And number one, Cassian. Okay, and I was the number one for me surprised me, but I can talk about that. But I want to hear if you have thoughts. Who are your favorite characters, or if you want to go uh 5 to 1, or just name a few. Daphne, how about you? What have you
So
got?
one on my list, number five, albeit, but still on the list that surprised me is actually Partagast. I really enjoyed him as a character. And what I first I just thought it was a completely like peripheral sort of enjoyment, like, oh, someone's clever and we all like it when evil people also like are a bit ironic and insightful. But just seeing that he got an arc too, and that he was actually intelligent and not just clever, and that this intelligence also searched for truth, and when it found it, it couldn't
Mhm.
bear it, and that meant something to him. That Nemec is my one. Just sorry for spoiling the, yeah, not following the countdown structure. Um, and seeing those two sort of, yeah, opposites unite, and actually him Partagas being affected by it was yeah, it felt almost strange to say, but like a treat. Like, we get a conclusion for this one too, and depth for this one as well. Mm, I also really like Mon as a character, more in terms. Well, yeah, it's always a twofold appreciation. You appreciate the character for how they affect you, but also in terms of craft. And that's someone that Tony Gilroy crafted this character of the politician and made her so nuanced that at the same time she's such an important voice. And I mentioned before when we talked, Luke, how surprised I was that um, one episode revolved, or so much of one episode revolved just around how important it was that Mon holds the speech in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
second to last episode, I
Mhm.
believe, and that the words of politicians mean something and are just existential to so many people around them. I thought was such a powerful thing, and to have her as this character at the same time, to have her have this just so it's so psychologically insightful and nuanced, to have her have this strange disconnect from the reality of the rebellion, and to be shocked after she holds this speech, to be shocked at seeing Cassian kill people on their way out.
Mm.
Because what? How could you do that? Right after she, in front of like millions of people, spoke about the massacre and the importance of the um, yeah, of fighting Palpatine. Yeah, so she stands out to me. It's just like stands out. That's not the sort of character you see in Star Wars, in newer Star Wars material. Yeah, and my favorite again is Nemec. Also as in terms of craft, just he seems to sum up so much. He when I see Nemec as a character on screen, I just see a screenwriter looking at all sorts of different kinds of idealists, and there's always
Hmm.
the one who's kind of young and kind of abstracted but also completely sincere and would join a real material rebellion if there were one, and in this case there is one and he does. And at the same time, so we have been talking, or you, Luke, have been making the point so much that Andor is, yeah, that it transports these higher level themes. And I think Nemec as a character is just one point where the philosophy behind, yeah, everything that he says about freedom and yeah, what it means, and yeah, in his manifesto, that is such an elegant way to bring in higher level thoughts in a concrete way into the story. And seeing that manifesto pop up every now and then throughout the two seasons really felt like a little motif in a symphony, where really the highest
Mm.
level thoughts of the series appear over and over and affect people in different ways.
And if I may, I'll just read a few lines from that just
Please,
to
yeah.
capstone. There will be times when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this: freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they are already enlisted in the cause. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere, and even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And then remember this: the imperial need for control is so desperate. I'm having flashes to Deidre. Because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks, it leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. And know this: the day will come when all these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance, will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this: try.
That
Joseph?
ties off what we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier very well about Cassian becomes the person that just tries that next step in the
Yeah.
hopes that this time it's that one thing that will burst the dam.
And Jen repeating that, there's one chance, then the next chance, and the next chance. Yeah. How about you, Joseph? Any particular favorite characters? Did Cassian make the list?
I think Luthen's my top. Um, just because I find contemplating his choices very interesting to me. Like just right now, it's been top of mind in the most severe kinds of conflicts. What's permissible and um, what's worth doing to your own soul, and he embodies that kind of question. So he's uh he's the top of my list.
Cool. So is I'll share why Cassian made the top of my list. Um, and I think it's I think it's thinking of him in contrast to Luthen and how they recruit and get buy-in for a cause. And we've already
Mm.
spoken about the speech to Naya. And the way that he gets her to join is by telling her, this is who you are. You know you don't want them to win. You've already made that thinking. And when you take this action that is going to upend things, that also might really disrupt things, that might get people killed, when you take this action, it's not that you're giving something up. It's that you are gaining something dear, and that is your sense of self. For
Mm.
Luthen, the way he recruits, the way he convinces is by telling Clea, look around you. Look at everything that you're going to give up, that you have to give up. And Cassian is constantly interested in helping the individual realize their best self, that self that has made the decision that they need to fight. Even the small interaction with the bellhop for me is very memorable, where he sees the bellhop, he hears the
Mm.
story of the bellhop, and as the bellhop is leaving, he says, "Wait," and he just says, "Good to know you," with a smile on his face, and that kind of, I see you, I understand you, and I know you. So for Cassian, he's got a kind of circle, and it's a circle of individuals who are coming together, realizing in a positive way that this is the value that they want to fight for. And it's it's who they are. It's built into them. So I if there was a mentor or a coach, you could have Luth on one side or Cassian on the other. I'd want Luthen. I'm sorry, I want
Yeah,
Cassian.
yeah,
I want
Cassian.
Cassian. Luthen would be like Luke.
Well, one way you might
Yeah,
essentialize that is Luthen thinks you have to destroy your soul to win.
yeah,
Cassian thinks that the only way to win is realizing he does absorb Nemec's lesson that the freedom is natural and really the rebellion is the only natural state for you. It's coming home,
yeah,
right? Versus Luthen's very different. He says, like you said, to Clea, you're gonna look at all of this, but I think really what I could say saying is not just all of these other things, but also destroy your inside too. All right. Um,
yeah.
like don't expect to win. We're doing it for somebody else. Whereas Cassian realizes I can't look at myself if I'm not doing this. And yeah, it's for the preservation of his soul.
I love it. I love that, Joseph, and you put it in words better than I could. Um, let's wrap up here because we're at time, and I'll wrap up with one question. Stepping back and maybe projecting out into the future, many years from now, I'll probably be rewatching Andor, but if I think to what is going to stick with me, and if you think to what is going to stick with you, whether it's a scene, whether it's an idea, whether it's a character, whether it's a quote, whether it's a feeling, what is it that you think you're going to really hold on to and take away? And I'll start off and I'll share. I I think for me, just what am I going to take away? I'm taking away something that I can constantly revisit that I really love being in the world of. And I don't mean like the Star Wars world. I mean in the intellectual world, in the way that characters talk to each other, in the way that ideas permeate this world, that my mind feels vibrant when I watch this show. And so just knowing that I could dip back into that experience as time goes on, that's something that I'm going to take away. Now, in terms of particular characters or moments or things that are now skin to me, as Vel might say, I think it's something just it's that Naya that speech to Naya. I think it's the bellhop. I think it's the thing that I love about Cassian, who for me has been kind of a character that I've had kind of not been fully invested in, but there's that one aspect of him, the way that he relates to people, that he wants to draw out of them in a fight to the death, that this is something that fulfills yourself. And that he is seeing that, and that's how he's relating to people. And as a teacher, that's something that I want to have the Cassian approach to getting to know my students, to bonding with them, rather than a Luthen approach or a skiing approach or a Dedra approach. So, Daphne, what do you think? What's gonna stick with you?
What you said about this world permeated by thought and being able to dip back into that, that really resonated with me. And it made me think also of the books that I like so much and having the same, yeah, sense of drama and intellectually motivated action, that's meaningful. Having that in a form that's as immediate as television, as film, and has this
Mm.
cosmic scope that also the serial format allows for, just makes it, yeah, so much more special. And in terms of concretely elements of the story that will go on to affect me, yeah, I think that, well, Luthen's story is a story of sacrifice and just sort of having a cause and your life and seeing how those two, how you can pull them both off, how you have to sacrifice one for the other or don't. That's so important, I think, whether it's a political cause, which it well might be, or just anything that can just really dominate your existence, like a very intense job, or other commitments like that. I think seeing this world of different characters who have different ways of embodying, yeah, a stance to that, is so powerful. I love thinking in terms of characters,
Mm.
more in terms of abstract arguments for why you should do that or that. And I think this universe just really gives a palette that's, yeah, that you don't get a lot in television. I think, or one thing that I'm wondering about, and this is an open question, is it seems to be taking people a lot of work to get to these deep themes and to the beauty of Andor. And I noticed also in talking to you guys and also to you, like in the past, how much richer, like this whole coming back to yourself thing, and how characters, yeah, the real deep meaning of these long arcs that their development, yeah, goes through. I wonder if in the future, like Andor sets a certain standard of how meaningful characters can be, but I wonder if it can, yeah, if we can write shows that build on that and somehow, yeah, make these themes either more obvious or manage to get even more beautiful speeches, more poetic speeches, uh, yeah, and I think Andor really broke the ice there and sets a high standard. So I'm really excited to see what it might look like to stand on those shoulders.
I like that thought a lot, Daphne, and I'm excited to see what your work looks like when you're standing on
Let's
those
see.
shoulders too. All right, Joseph, how about you? What's going to stick with you?
Um, I think the big, probably more immediate lesson is how do I make sure I don't fall asleep so that I don't need somebody like Martha to tell me to wake up.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and the current climate and landscape is going in directions we can't quite foresee yet, but there
Mhm.
may be a time that we need to make certain choices, and it'd be nicer to be awake for it when it happens.
Well, maybe, Joseph, this might be a good point to end with uh, Marva's speech, a little bit of Marva's speech, her funerary oration, and we'll wrap up with this. And here she goes. My name is Marv Karasi Andor. I'm honored to stand before you. I'm honored to be a daughter of Ferrix and honored to be worthy of the stone. I was 6, I think, the first time I touched. Oh, is that the same age that Cassian was? The touched the funerary stone, heard our music, felt our history, holding my sister's hand as we walked all the way from Fountain Square, where you stand now. I've been more times than I can remember. Always wanted to be. I always wanted to be lifted. I was always eager, always waiting to be inspired. I remember every time it happened, every time the dead lifted me in their truth. And now I'm dead, and I yearn to lift you. Not because I want to shine or even be remembered. It's because I want you to go on. I want Ferrex to continue. In my waning hours, that's what comforts me most. But I fear for you. We've been sleeping. We had each other and Ferrex, our work, our days. We had each other, and they left us alone. We kept the trade lanes open, and they left us alone. We took their money and ignored them. We kept their engines turning, and the moment they pulled away, we forgot them because we had each other. We had Ferrex, but we were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. Oh, this is making me think of Mon Mothma's speech. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's here, and it's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is ever more alive, never more alive, than when we sleep. It's easy for the dead to tell you to fight. And maybe it's true. Maybe fight is useless. Perhaps it is too late. But I'll tell you this. If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire. And natural consequence for Cassian, fights till the end. That wraps it up, and I think that's going to wrap it up for Andor as art. We'll see. Maybe there'll be more. We could talk about this for a lot longer, but Daphne, I want to thank you for joining me a couple times on the series, and Joseph, I want to thank you for joining me for several of these episodes. It's been rewarding and
To everyone
revelatory.
listening, message Luke and tell him to watch The Bear so we can do The Bear as art as our next series.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.